What legal actions of people made you lose respect for them? That kind of behavior rewires how you move at work, whether you want it to or not. What you described is a really common but quietly corrosive pattern. People who treat ideas and fixes like currency, something to be claimed rather than shared. Even when it's nothing huge, it sends a very clear signal about trust. Once someone takes credit for something you contributed, even a small suggestion, you immediately learn that transparency with them is unsafe. You didn't become guarded out of pettiness, you adapted to protect yourself. The boss doing the same thing is even worse, because it poisons the whole incentive structure. When leaders steal ideas, they train their teams not to think out loud. Creativity, collaboration, and initiative all dry up, not because people are lazy, but because they're rational. Why offer ideas freely when they'll just be laundered through someone else's ego? What stands out to me is how consciously you reacted to that experience in the opposite direction. Being intentional about credit, about I versus we, about owning mistakes without hiding behind the group, that's real professional integrity. It's subtle, but people notice, especially the ones who've been burned before. The contrast with that more experienced coworker is telling. When you made a mistake, it was individualized and exposed. Mike screwed up. When he made one, it magically became collective. We screwed up. That's not leadership, and it's not mentorship. It's self-preservation at someone else's expense. People like that often wonder why no one trusts them or has their back later. There's a quiet power in consistently giving credit where it's due. It builds psychological safety. It tells people, you won't disappear if you speak up around me. Over time, that reputation matters more than any single idea or win. Ironically, the people most obsessed with taking credit usually end up respected the least. You learned an unfortunate lesson early, but you also learned how not to be that person. And workplaces need more of that. People who understand that success isn't diminished by sharing credit, and that accountability actually gains weight when you don't dodge it. If there's a silver lining, it's this. Once you've seen credit theft up close, you never unsee it. And you become very deliberate about not perpetuating it. That's a kind of professionalism that doesn't show up on resumes, but it absolutely shapes careers and cultures. That kind of behavior hits a very specific nerve, because it isn't just unsportsmanlike, it's exploiting someone's disability for advantage. That crosses from gamesmanship into something a lot uglier. The wrestling story is especially gross. Coaches are supposed to protect athletes and uphold the integrity of the sport, not look for loopholes to confuse a deaf competitor who's already had to adapt more than anyone else in the room. The fact that the opposing coach lost respect instantly says everything. Even if nothing illegal was written in the rulebook about mat slapping, everyone there understood it was morally bankrupt. Same with the soccer example. The hand raise convention exists so deaf players can participate safely and fairly. Violating that isn't clever or edgy. It's deliberately abusing a shared accommodation. The ref giving a yellow card was technically correct under the rules, but I get why you wanted a red. That kind of action shows intent, not a mistake. It wasn't a mistimed tackle or bad judgment in the flow of play. It was premeditated deception aimed at a protected accommodation. What really stands out is that in both cases, the social consequence mattered more than the official one. Sports are full of gray areas, but there's usually a strong informal moral code. Once someone shows they're willing to win by targeting a disability, they don't get the benefit of the doubt anymore. Teammates, opponents, officials, everyone recalibrates how they see that person. And honestly, that's probably the best outcome in the long run. Suspensions end, cards expire, but reputations stick. Being remembered as that guy who tried to confuse a deaf wrestler or the defender who abused the hand signal rule is not the legacy anyone wants, even if they thought they were being clever in the moment. It's one of those situations where the rule book can only go so far, but basic human decency is very clear, and most people recognize it immediately. One of those small things that reveals a lot about people is not putting weights back after using them at the gym. On the surface it seems trivial, but the attitude behind it says far more than the act itself. I once had an experience that stuck with me. At my gym, a woman had loaded a barbell with 25-kilo plates on each side. I wanted to use that station, so I waited patiently until she finished her set. When she stood up, I politely asked if she was done with the bar. She said yes. I then asked, just as politely, whether she could re-rack the plates once she was finished. Her response caught me completely off guard. She asked why I didn't just do it myself. I explained that I couldn't lift that much weight safely, and that since she had put the plates on the bar, it was reasonable for her to put them back. Instead of understanding, she responded with something along the lines of, "If you can't lift them, why are you even here?" Then she walked away, leaving the bar exactly as it was. That comment really stayed with me. The idea that if you're weak, you don't belong here completely misses the point of what a gym is supposed to be. People go to the gym specifically because they want to get stronger, healthier, or more capable than they currently are. Saying, "If you're weak, why are you trying to get stronger?" is not just unkind, it's fundamentally illogical. This mindset is closely related to how some people treat others at the gym, particularly beginners, or those who don't fit the stereotypical image of being fit. The same attitude shows up when people mock or judge overweight individuals who are trying to improve their health. Most of us, myself included, could benefit from being a little healthier. Making fun of people who are actively making an effort to better themselves is one of the most discouraging and unproductive behaviors imaginable. Interestingly, one local gym near me decided to address this issue directly. They have a policy where people who repeatedly fail to put equipment back are given penalties. Instead of monetary fines, they are required to perform a set of unpleasant but safe exercises before they're allowed to return to their workout. There's also a small element of public accountability involved. It's surprisingly effective, not because people fear the exercise, but because they're forced to confront the inconvenience they've caused others. This problem isn't limited to gyms. There seems to be a growing tendency for people to shift responsibility for their actions onto everyone else. I experienced this firsthand on public transportation. I once asked someone to stop smoking on a train, which was clearly prohibited. I explained that I had smoke-related lung damage and was struggling to breathe. Instead of apologizing or complying, the person told me that my health condition was my own problem and responded with a stream of insults. In that moment, it became painfully clear how comfortable some people are dismissing others' well-being if it requires even the smallest inconvenience on their part. Whether it's leaving weights on a bar, mocking someone for trying to improve themselves, or refusing to follow basic public rules, the common thread is a lack of accountability and empathy. These situations may seem minor in isolation, but together they reflect a broader issue, a reluctance to consider how our actions affect the people around us. And that, more than the weights or the smoke, is what truly makes shared spaces difficult. One behavior that is strangely normalized, but deeply frustrating, is leaving messes in grocery stores under the excuse that it provides workers with job security. It doesn't. Grocery store employees already have jobs. Creating unnecessary work doesn't make those jobs safer. It only makes them more exhausting, demoralizing, and unpleasant. Employees are not grateful when someone abandons items all over the store. They are tired. They are overworked. And they are forced to deal with the consequences of someone else's carelessness. The idea that mess-making is helpful is a comforting myth for people who don't want to take responsibility for their actions. The special problem of perishables. What truly crosses the line is when customers leave frozen or refrigerated items on random shelves instead of returning them or handing them to an employee. A frozen pizza left in the cereal aisle. A package of meat hidden behind cleaning supplies. Dairy products abandoned near checkout displays. This isn't harmless. Perishable food that sits out too long must be thrown away for safety reasons. That waste is not theoretical. It's real food, real money, and real loss. In the case of meat, an animal quite literally died for that product, only for it to be left to spoil because someone didn't want to walk a few extra steps. I once worked at Whole Foods in the vitamin and body care department. One night, while straightening shelves, I found nearly $80 worth of steak hidden behind bottles. It had all gone bad and had to be thrown out. That wasn't an accident. That was a deliberate choice, and the result was pure waste. Someone else will handle it. At the core of this behavior is a familiar mindset. Someone else will clean this up. It's not my problem. Sometimes, yes, it's probably absent-mindedness. People get distracted, change their minds, and set something down without thinking. But other times, it's intentional, and that's harder to excuse. Some shoppers seem to treat grocery stores like abstract spaces where consequences don't exist. Food simply appears on shelves, detached from farms, animals, labor, or cost. I once had a coworker who taught her children, now adults, that meat comes from the supermarket, not from animals. It was just something that existed to be purchased. If no one ever corrects that worldview, it's not hard to imagine how carelessness turns into waste. There is a simple alternative. What makes all of this even more frustrating is how easy it is to do the right thing. If you decide you don't want an item, you can return it to the correct shelf. If that feels inconvenient, you can hand it to a cashier and say, "I decided not to buy this." That's it. Problem solved. You don't need to make a statement. You don't need to punish a corporation. And you certainly don't need to make an underpaid worker's shift worse to justify your frustration or boredom. A small act that says a lot, leaving perishable food to rot, isn't just about laziness. It reflects how disconnected people can become from the systems that support them. It shows a lack of empathy, accountability, and awareness. Grocery stores are shared spaces. Workers are human beings. Food is not disposable just because it's temporarily in your hands. Small choices matter. And in places like grocery stores, decency is rarely complicated. It just requires a moment of consideration. Ticket scalping and reselling culture. When profit overrides fairness. One practice that consistently frustrates people is large-scale reselling, or scalping, of popular products at several times their original price. This is especially aggravating when it comes to concert tickets, when individuals buy tickets not because they care about the artist or the event, but solely to resell them later for 5 times the price. At that point, it stops being about access and becomes pure exploitation. Fans who genuinely want to attend an event are priced out, while resellers treat cultural experiences like a stock market. Attempts at regulation and loopholes. In response to this, some countries have tried to regulate or outright ban ticket scalping. For example, in Denmark, it is illegal to resell a ticket for more than its original purchase price. Australia has similar laws in place, and resellers there are often reported quickly on resale platforms. There's a strong cultural disdain for opportunistic profiteering, and enforcement tends to be taken seriously. On paper, these laws sound effective. But as with many regulations, people often find creative ways to get around them. A familiar example comes from places where possession of cannabis is legal, but selling it is not. Someone might sell a trivial item for an inflated price and include the substance as a free gift. The transaction technically avoids the letter of the law while completely ignoring its spirit. The same workaround appears in ticket reselling. You'll sometimes see listings for a festival ticket plus a bottle of water or some other meaningless add-on, priced far above face value. The ticket isn't being sold at a markup, technically. It's being bundled. In practice, The result is exactly the same. Enforcement challenges. Interestingly, there are relatively few legal cases that focus solely on overpriced ticket resale without additional elements like fraud or deception. This may be because most ticket sales now happen online, and the resale process is often controlled by ticketing companies themselves. These platforms act as intermediaries, setting rules, fees, and transfer mechanisms that can make second-hand sales inconvenient or opaque. Many people who've looked into buying or selling resale tickets report that the process can be confusing, restrictive, and expensive, sometimes intentionally so. While this does discourage casual reselling, it doesn't stop large-scale scalpers who treat it like a business. The core issue: ethics, not just legality. At the heart of the issue isn't just whether ticket scalping is legal, it's whether it's ethical. Buying something in bulk, purely to deny access to others unless they pay an inflated price, adds no value to society. It doesn't improve the product, enhance the experience, or contribute creatively. It simply exploits scarcity. That's why so many people react so strongly against resellers, even when no law is technically being broken. Cultural experiences, concerts, festivals, live performances, are meant to be shared moments, not financial instruments. When profit becomes the sole motivation, something important is lost. Until enforcement becomes more consistent or ticketing systems are redesigned to prioritize real fans, scalping will likely continue. But the widespread frustration surrounding it shows that, at least socially, many people have already decided where they stand. When Halloween courtesy disappears. The candy bowl problem. On Halloween, there's a long-standing tradition. People open their doors and hand out candy to trick-or-treaters. When someone can't be home, or simply isn't able to answer the door all evening, they often leave a bowl of candy on the porch with a simple, hopeful sign that says, "Please take one." It's an act of trust and a small gesture of community goodwill. Unfortunately, that trust is often broken. Please take one, taken literally, and then some. It's not uncommon for a single child to empty the entire bowl into their bag in one go. That alone is disappointing, but what truly pushes it into deeply frustrating territory is when parents actively participate. Seeing adults encourage, or at least silently allow, their children to take every last piece of candy feels especially disheartening. At that point, it's no longer childish impulse, it's learned behavior. Some people report not only losing all the candy, but the bowl itself, sometimes containing $20 or more worth of treats, vanishing along with it. Losing the candy is one thing. Losing the actual bowl feels like adding insult to injury. Repeat offenders and adaptation. In some neighborhoods, this behavior becomes a yearly pattern. There are stories of the same individual taking every unattended bowl on the street year after year. After being targeted once, homeowners adapt, switching to cardboard boxes, keeping bowls out of sight, or simply staying by the door all evening to prevent another loss. Every Halloween, neighborhood social media groups light up with the same posts. Someone expresses surprise that their bowl was emptied, and dozens of others respond with knowing sympathy. It's practically become part of the holiday discourse. When accountability becomes awkward. One particularly telling story involves a group of neighbors discussing a teenager who had been caught on camera dumping a candy bowl. An outsider to the conversation joked that it was a rude move and said they'd be disappointed if their own child behaved that way. They even mentioned that they'd inform the parents if it happened at their house. Only then did it become clear. The neighbors weren't talking about a random teen. They were talking about their child, and they were defending him. Worse, they were upset with the neighbor who had called them to report the behavior. The situation became uncomfortable, but the point still stood. Sometimes accountability feels awkward only because it clashes with denial. Beyond candy, a broader pattern. The issue isn't limited to candy bowls. Some people report items like porch plants being stolen and later resold at local swap meets. It's baffling, petty, and leaves you wondering what motivates people to take things that clearly aren't meant for them. The role of social consequences. There's an argument to be made that communities have gone too far in avoiding shame altogether. Not humiliation, not cruelty, but reasonable social disapproval. When bad behavior carries no consequences, it tends to repeat. Teaching children that taking everything for themselves is unacceptable isn't harsh. It's part of raising considerate members of society. Feeling embarrassed when your child behaves poorly isn't a failure of parenting. It's a sign that you understand shared norms still matter. Halloween is supposed to be about fun, generosity, and community spirit. Emptying a candy bowl, especially with adult approval, undermines all of that. And maybe a little collective disappointment is exactly what's needed to keep those traditions alive. Rudeness toward service. Staff, a small act that reveals a lot. Being rude to service staff may be legal, but it says an enormous amount about a person's character. How someone treats people who are simply doing their job, especially when those people have no power over the situation, is often a clearer indicator of who they are than how they behave around peers or superiors. Basic courtesy isn't difficult. For many people, being polite is almost automatic. Sometimes you even catch yourself thinking, "Did I forget to say please?" and compensate with an extra sincere "thank you" a moment later. That kind of self-awareness feels normal, which is why it's so jarring to hear others bark commands like, "Give me this," or "I want that," without so much as a courtesy word. It's not about formality, it's about recognizing the humanity of the person standing in front of you. At its core, rudeness often comes from the belief that one person is somehow above another. Being dismissive or cruel simply because you think your status, money, or role makes you superior is one of the ugliest traits a person can display. A story from hospitality. While working in hospitality, I once witnessed a moment that perfectly illustrated this problem, but from the other side of the counter. A coworker rushed to lock a bathroom just as a guest was approaching it. The guest was doing a paid photo shoot on the property, something she had paid extra for, and only needed a place to quickly change outfits. Otherwise, she would have had to walk a long distance back to her car in the cold, wearing an impractical formal dress. My coworker took visible pleasure in shutting the door and telling her, "Rules are rules. It's after 5. Figure it out." Then she walked away. What made it worse was that this wasn't some unavoidable policy issue. There were several other things that could have been locked instead, and the bathroom could easily have remained open for another 10 minutes. It was located right next to the employee parking lot and posed no real inconvenience. Choosing kindness over convenience. I had already clocked out and was just steps away from my car, but I stopped. I called security, asked for permission, and then directed the guest to a staff bathroom that I had a key for. My coworker protested, saying the bathroom was for staff only. I told her not to worry about it. It took 5 minutes of my time. I wasn't on the clock, I wasn't obligated to help. But the question that mattered was simple. If a small inconvenience to me could significantly ease someone else's situation, why wouldn't I do it? The bigger picture. Being kind doesn't require grand gestures. Often it's just about choosing not to be difficult when you don't have to be. Service staff, guests, customers, everyone is navigating their own challenges, most of which we never see. If 5 minutes of compassion can make someone's day noticeably better, that seems like time well spent. And if refusing that kindness makes someone feel small or powerless, then maybe the real issue isn't the rules, it's the attitude behind enforcing them. How people reveal their values through hierarchy. I once worked with a young guy at an entry-level factory job, fresh out of high school. Like many places, we had a custodian who was universally liked. He genuinely enjoyed his work, took pride in it, and treated everyone with kindness and respect. People liked him not just because he did his job well, but because he was a good human being. One day, The boss asked the custodian to pass along a message to our team about a specific task we needed to complete. Nothing unusual, just workplace communication. When the custodian relayed the message, the young guy scoffed and said, "I'm not listening to him. He's just the janitor." That single sentence said far more about the kid than it ever did about the custodian. The unspoken hierarchy. Whether people are willing to admit it or not, a large portion of the population, arguably half to varying degrees, is constantly assessing where others fall in a perceived social or professional hierarchy. They're always trying to figure out who matters, who has authority, and who can be ignored. This mindset often leads to abrupt and awkward shifts in behavior. Someone might be friendly and polite until they realize you don't have the status they assumed you had. Or the opposite happens. Once they discover you hold more influence than they thought, their tone suddenly changes. The respect was never about you as a person. It was about where they thought you ranked. Seen from the other side. As a custodian at a public school, I can confirm this dynamic exists very clearly. There are teachers and staff members who understand what we do and recognize that schools don't function without custodial work. They treat us like coworkers, like members of the same team, because we are. Then there are others who go out of their way not to acknowledge us at all. No eye contact, no greeting, no basic courtesy. It's as if pretending we don't exist somehow reinforces their own sense of importance. I've developed a bit of dark humor around it. I'll jokingly refer to myself as the help when speaking to teachers or administrators. It usually gets a laugh, but what's telling is that no one ever challenges it. No one says, "No, you're part of the staff," or "You're one of us." The joke lands because, on some level, everyone recognizes the uncomfortable truth behind it. What it really says, how people treat custodians, janitors, cleaners, or any role they consider lower status, reveals their character more honestly than how they treat their bosses or peers. Respect that only flows upward isn't respect at all, it's calculation. Workplaces, schools, and communities only function because of people in every role. Ignoring or dismissing someone because of their job title doesn't make you important. It just makes your values painfully clear.